Welcome back to the Cibolo Creek Conversations podcast. My name is Wyatt Marchant. I'm here with my good friend, Mr. Paul Wilson. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Yeah. Beautiful day here in Texas.
It is finally cool.
Yeah. I actually wore a sweater today.
You had a vest
I had
on.
a little puffy
little
vest
puffy
on.
vest.
I don't
If
know
you
why.
call a vest a little puffy vest,
I
it
don't
makes
know
it
why
sound
you
better.
call it a puffy vest. That just
And then adding the lil in front of it.
makes it sounded wrong. But
Yeah, I can't pull off a vest. I don't think.
oh, you can't?
I don't. I used to wear them, but I was called metrosexual back then, so
That's probably a pretty
which
good
just
term.
means that you care about how you look. And now I literally just wear.
Is that what that means?
That's what that means. It
I
just
don't think that's
sounds.
what
It
that
no, it does.
means.
Look it up. It just sounds more. It just sounds more like weird.
So I tend to run hot.
Yeah.
So I don't always choose a jacket because then it's too much. And I like vests because it'll kind of keep my core warm, but my arms are not. So
Yeah.
I'm sure our listeners are very interested.
Yeah, they were wondering, why does Paul wear a vest?
Why does Paul wear a little puffy
A
vest?
little puffy vest.
Okay, I'm not going to call it that anymore.
Well, that's what I'm calling it now, henceforth.
Every time you see me, you'll say, "Oh, cute little puffy vest you got
Yep,
there, Paul."
a little puffy vest. You should preach in it on Sunday.
Because that's our love language, is giving each other a hard time.
Indeed. So I tell everybody who doesn't know you well, I'm like, just make fun of him once and he'll be your friend. I'm like, just give him a hard time one time.
My love language. No, I'm kind of excited that fall, at least fall temperatures seem to have arrived. Hopefully they'll stick around for a few weeks.
Yes, and then get colder. It's my hope, but
great football weather.
Yes.
So that's what I like it.
Yep. But all right, well, today we want to talk about something that we've kind of been hitting on a few times in some of our past episodes, but what are just a handful of tips for parents to faithfully raise their kids?
Tips for parents raising their kids. Primarily from like a spiritual perspective.
Probably.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. But anything you got's fine.
Anything.
Well, we'll see.
You know, so again, you let me know yesterday, later in the afternoon, what our topic would be, and I was just telling you that I got a couple things going, so I've been busy. Plus, I'm trying to wrap up this week's message, which I'm excited about, but I'm having a hard time wrestling it to the ground in terms of time management. Imagine that. Just got a lot of things I want to share. I can't share it all. But anyways, I haven't had a lot of time to really think this thing through from like a content-rich manuscript. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, you know, me as a person, just kind of the way I am wired and the way I think, I tend to think in like big categories. And because I'm a big fan of wisdom, that's kind of my adventure in life, is how to live wisely. I tend to be, I don't think it's unique to me, but the way I'm wired is very natural to me, to always think in terms of what biblical principles should guide my life. And again, I don't think I'm the only one who does that, but I think maybe that's kind of one of the dimensions when you spend your whole career as a pastor and a preacher. You tend to think in terms of what biblical principles apply to this situation. And so that's what I got to thinking about last night when I was trying to give this some time, was what overarching biblical principles come to bear on good parenting. So that's how I decided to kind of lay out my thoughts for today. So I think of 3 or 4 that I think are really, really critical. And the first one is, one of the principles that the scriptures indicate about parents and children is children are a gift from God. And so when I think about that, I think the way that I interpret that is that a parent ought to be um, really grateful and value this opportunity that they have to raise these kids. And so the way that that kind of showed itself in my life and my life, the life of my marriage. So I'm married to Charlotte. We've had we have two sons. They're 30 and 25. Um, but when our boys were little, as a family, we really cherished and treasured any time that we had with our kids. It was our favorite thing to do. It was our favorite place to be. It was our favorite um, priority in life. Is we just really treasured the gift of our children. And so when I think of like what a parent should do, I would just from that principle of children are a gift from God. I think parents ought to endeavor to the very best of their ability to make their home a place where their kids are celebrated, treasured, valued. So for us, that was we really worked hard at protecting time with our kids. Uh, Both of us are busy. Both of us as parents, we were busy, and lots of families live with kind of mom and dad both have a career. And in our society, it seems like success is measured more about like how well you do in your career rather than how well you do at your home. And so, um, Charlotte and I being aware of that, even as pastors, we can get really busy. The church can become an enormously important priority. We just had this commitment that our home, our family, our kids would always be our top priority. It didn't make any sense to me to build a great church and ruin a family in the process.
Yeah.
Like I've always felt like that's upside down, but not every pastor thinks that way. Um, so all that to say is Charlotte and I really treasured and valued our children as gifts that God has given to us. So a couple of the unique expressions of how we did that is we had a we had a high priority and a huge commitment to always having dinner together.
Mm.
Mornings, school mornings were kind of everybody's out and about. We weren't necessarily sitting down for a meal together. Oftentimes in the kitchen together, scurrying around, getting our stuff ready to get out the door. Naturally, when they were in school, everybody was having lunch in different places. But even then, Charlotte and I made it an effort to get to school and have lunch with our boys occasionally, bring them lunch. That was always a big deal. And, but we were relentless about the evening meal, whether you call that dinner or supper. I don't know. Did you call it supper or dinner?
I call it dinner, but
I grew up calling it supper.
so did my grandpa, and he's 80 something. So.
Okay. Thanks. I was thinking it was more a regional thing than a generational
I don't think
thing.
so.
But anyways, yeah, we were just like, we will eat together. We will eat dinner together every night. And it was every night as often as I mean, there were very few exceptions. Um, Even if I had an evening meeting, which in the early days of Cibolo Creek, there seemed to be a lot of those for me. Um, we'd work it out where I'd run home for an hour and a half before that meeting so that we could have dinner together. Now, naturally, it changed a little when the boys got older in high school and we had sports or band or some other extracurricular activities. But the way that worked out for us is we would just wait to eat dinner until they got home.
Yeah.
And so we developed, and their friends always made fun of us. We'd have dinner at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I mean, that was not unusual
Yeah.
because we were like, no, we're going to have dinner together, and everyone's not going to be home till 8:30, so we'd be eating at 9. Um, my oldest No, my youngest son has a couple of friends that they were always at our house, and we'd invite them over for dinner, and they'd be like, "Yeah, I had to eat. I had to eat earlier, knowing that I was coming to your house. I wouldn't be eating again till like 9 o'clock."
Yep.
So that was just a huge commitment to us. I think that's a really important parenting tip.
Yeah.
Um, Spend time with your kids, treasure time with your kids, and protect time with your kids. And having dinner together was one of those ways that we protected that. So we had a lot of fun at the dinner table. Everybody shared about their day. It wasn't us like dragging it out of our kids. We developed sort of those strategies for not allowing them to just give us a yes, no, fine kind of answer. Um, and, after a while, that was all very comfortable and natural for us to just have great discussions, tell jokes, pick on each other, talk about things that each of us were learning. It wasn't unusual for our kids to ask me what I was learning or what my wife Charlotte was learning. It wasn't about, what are you learning at school? They sort of learned the permission to say, what are you learning at work? Or what are you
Yeah.
going to preach about this week or something? So, um, we're big for parties. We're big for holidays. We celebrated all the holidays, to the very uh, best of our ability. We decorate. If there were costumes involved, we do the costumes. If there was traditions to that we wanted to create, we honored those traditions as all of an expression of we really treasured our kids, and we wanted our home to be a place where they felt valued and really special to us. So there's other ways I think families can really live out this principle that their children are, a gift from God. But um, that was always important to to Charlotte and I, and those are some of the ways I just mentioned, are some of the ways that we went about trying to, always keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And it's funny now. Like I said, our boys are 30 and 25, and they both live in Austin, which is about an hour and a half from here. Um, And we get to see them fairly often. We're either going up there or they're coming home to see us. Um, Anytime in between those visits seems like forever because just think the world of our boys. And it's fun to watch them now as young men and kind of charting their own path as adults. But um, Charlotte and I often say we'd go back to we'd go back 20 years in a moment if we could. We just loved having our boys around. And um, so I don't know if that makes sense, but that whole idea of really keeping in mind your kids are a gift. And the thing I tell young parents is it'll go so fast.
Yeah.
Uh, I know there's always like certain stretches of time when your kids are really little that seems like it's going to go on forever, but man, it just goes so fast. I still kind of find myself going, man, my son's 30. And how do we get here so fast? But so again, the first thing that I would say parents is learn how to treasure, celebrate, really value this remarkable gift that God's given to you.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. I got
And
out of that. What I got out of that was see them as a gift and then treat them as such. So prioritize
yeah,
time with them. And like, I can't, I loved that my family did the dinner table thing too.
yeah,
And so, because we were all busy during the day, but we knew that every time we'd come home, we would, have dinner together. Granted, it was just me. And so sometimes, maybe we didn't talk a whole bunch, but we always knew that we would be there. We could talk about our day. It's also
right,
where I learned how to like talk about different topics and
right,
have, little debates with my family. And,
right.
um, yeah, so that went a long way for me. And then also like something that I plan on doing with my kids is like, that's where like we're each going to take turn praying and talking
Yeah,
about how we're, not like a weird Bible study kind of way, but just like, hey, like what,
yeah,
how's life?
yeah,
What's going on? And so, yeah, so that, and it's an everyday thing to where it's like, well, I prioritize once a month we do something fun. Well, like that's awesome, but it's like, it's not an everyday thing. Whereas the dinner
yeah.
table is.
Yeah, and we did the same thing as we took turns. I didn't always pray. Charlotte would pray. One of the boys would pray. We tried to mix prayer up and do fun things with it to keep it, kind of real and interesting. And like I said, like you said, we weren't necessarily saying, okay, let's open our little devotional book and read this reading. Again, that works. Some families do it great. I'm just saying we didn't do it that way. It was more organic. Hey, what did you guys learn in Sunday school today? What were you talking about? And then kind of extrapolating that out in a way that let them
Yeah.
know that we were interested in that kind of stuff with them. And again, because of the nature of my work, again, typically as they got a little bit older, they were curious about stuff I was learning and stuff I was teaching on. And so we had some of those conversations around the table, but typically in very organic rather than a forced or structured kind of way.
Something else that you said that I think is really important is, like, you didn't wanna build a great church, but destroy a family, but that goes for any career.
Yeah,
Like, you don't
absolutely.
wanna have a great career, but your family is, desperate to just have time with you.
Absolutely. And say I'm a pastor, so I sit with a lot of people oftentimes sadly picking up the pieces of poor choices and poor priorities in life. And so I've seen over 40 years, I've seen the fact that a lot of people, especially a lot of dads, I'll just go right out there and say that. A lot of dads unfortunately make the choice that their career is the most important priority of their life. And they end up sinking all of their best energy, all their best time into their career, and then they wonder why their kids don't trust them, don't talk to them, don't relate to them. It's because they, in many ways, ignored their kids, especially in the early stages of a career when
Or they get the worst part
kids
of
are
you
little.
where
Yeah,
you're tired and grouchy
you're
and
tired and grouchy
you
and
don't wanna
grumpy,
play
and
or talk or
yeah, exactly. So that's what I was saying earlier. Is I think our society really champions and values that, successful career. And if you get seduced by that, then you have to make choices. And you end up saying, my best time and energy will go to my career, and then my kids get the leftovers. And so, kids are pretty smart, uh, incredibly smart. And so I think what ends up happening over time is a kid is making an evaluation of what their value is. Oh, I'm not as important as dad's job. I'm not as important as the money that my parents are trying to make. And I think you're not teaching them that I'm valuable and that I'm important.
yeah.
So that was always an important thing to us is celebrate our kids, really let them know that we thought the world of them and that they were important to our life as a family.
Something else cool with that is that, like, then they want to spend time at home. Like, they
Oh
aren't
yeah,
always just trying to leave 24/7,
yeah,
and they'll bring their friends around. So, like, I think, like, what you just described with, your son's friends coming over all the time. Like, my friends would always come over, and we'd have like, if we were having dinner, we would sit with my parents or my
yeah,
entire family
right,
even. So, like, Allie, like, we started dating, and she got tossed into the middle of it, like, from the get-go. Like,
right,
well, we're having dinner, so, yeah, we all sit around the table and eat.
yeah. Oh yeah, it's kind of funny and it's a little bit of a joke in our family. You know, Charlotte's Charlotte's an outstanding mom. I mean, just exceptional at being a mother, and she just was so disciplined and diligent about it. But whenever our boys would show up with 3 or 4 other friends, oftentimes unannounced, like they're just, "Hey, coming through the door, right? We're gonna play video games." It was funny to watch my wife scramble to try to make something with whatever was in the house. And it did take her but 10 minutes, and the next thing you know, here's brownies, or here's cookies, or here's ice cream sundaes or something, or she's running to the store real quick to pick something up to make it, so yeah, she would do anything and everything it took to make our place really fun, and that was the strategic part of it is we knew that then our boys would like to be there, and they would bring their friends there rather than always running off to their friend's house. So,
Speaking on that principle,
yeah.
I have a question for you because I have an opinion on this, but
Okay.
What do you say about the parents who say, especially whenever the kids get older, say they're in high school, it's prom or whatever, and they're like, "Well, come to our house and we'll have the alcohol. We'll be the fun house where it's all safe," and so on and so forth. What is your opinion on that?
I think that's an absolutely lousy
Yeah.
approach to
Yeah, yeah.
parenting.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Yeah, any parent who's modeling for their kids, you can break the law here at our house because it'll be safer. That's a lousy model.
Yeah.
And you know, I actually have a very vivid story in my life as a pastor where a parent did that. They hosted, it was actually a prom event at the house with the permission that the kids could consume alcohol. And what they didn't recognize is that, well, it might have been okay for their kid, it wasn't okay for another kid. And a really tragic event ended up transpiring.
Mm,
And so you may think it's all right for your kid, but you don't know the story of all the other kids.
yeah.
And you don't know what their history is, and you don't know what their situation is. And so, yeah, it's just lousy all the way around. And I'd be embarrassed to be a parent who said, "Yeah, well, that's what I did." Like that's really a really poor parenting model.
Yeah. I've also found that the parents who do that tend to, like, drink with the kids.
Yeah.
And normally the parents are also big partiers, and so, like,
Yeah.
they're just as drunk as the kid, which is already, like, it's just
Yes.
the model that's being shown is so bad.
What they're doing is they're justifying their own behavior,
Yeah.
and it's sad. It's sad that you grow up in a parenting context where your parents are so immature and weak. That's how I see that.
I feel like people who drink past the age of 25, like, a lot is kinda sad in general, but that's just my opinion. It's like, "What are you doing?" But okay. Alright. That's very good. I think that we got that one.
Okay, so children are a gift from God. Second biblical principle that I think is probably even greater or more important is that children are a stewardship. And for our listeners who may not understand the concept or what I'm saying when I'm thinking of when I say stewardship, is the biblical principle of stewardship is essentially this: God has entrusted some things to us to take care of on His behalf. And it's a fascinating study of the scriptures. I think it's one of the inherent designs of how God intended life to work. So I'm a big proponent of stewardship. And the truth of the matter is, you dig down into it, there's a lot of different stewardships. So I believe our bodies are a stewardship. God's entrusted this to my care, and I'm to use it for His purposes.
Yeah.
Um, our time is a stewardship. God entrusts to us a number of years, hours, minutes, days, that whole thing. He entrusts us with time, um, and we're supposed to take good care of it on His behalf. Um, Spiritual gifts are stewardships. I believe the gospel is a stewardship. Um, I believe that marriage is a stewardship. Money is a huge stewardship. Is God entrusting it to my care to be used for His purposes? So in that vein of stewardship, I believe that children are stewardship. This is something that God has entrusted to the care of parents to take care of on His behalf. And so, um, the way that I interpret that is, I'm responsible for managing and mentoring the life of this human being that God has placed in my home. And kind of going back to the discussion we just had about parents creating these places for kids to drink. Um, I think that a parent has to keep in mind that I'm to be the parent and to partner with these kids in helping them become who they need to be, rather than I'm supposed to be their best friend or I'm supposed to be their buddy. That doesn't mean you can't have a friendly relationship, and doesn't mean you can't have a lot of fun, with your kids in a buddy kind of way. But your higher and more holy calling is you are to be a steward of their life. So it's on the parent's shoulders to prepare that child for the life ahead of them. And that's, I mean, that's discipline, that's respect, teaching your children how to act with, respect or be respectful of others, teaching your children how to manage their time, their body, their homework, their money, having input on, how they treat other people when it comes to kindness or, compassion. That's all part of a parent's responsibility. And I think where a lot of parents go wrong on this is they're just not intentional about it all. They're just sort of hoping their kid's gonna pick up on all the right things, and it hopefully by some sort of strange osmosis, the kid's gonna grow up to be respectful and disciplined and kind and considerate and all the things. And I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that stuff has to be managed and mentored by some very um, specific or disciplined exercises that a parent creates for their child uh, to learn a certain way of life. Uh, so little things for us at Cibolo, I keep calling it at Cibolo, at the Wilson house was, you know, we wanted the boys to be, servant hearted. We wanted them to be compassionate. We wanted them to be kind. So we took advantage of opportunities to go out and serve people that needed help. Uh, we encouraged them either to do that with other kids their age, whether that was through a youth group or something, or we as a family would, join together. At Cibolo, we have a big thing called Serving Sunday. We've been doing it for 20 years. And we tried most of those serving Sundays when our kids were still at home, that Charlotte and I would choose one of the serving projects, and the four of us would go and serve together. It's a way to model for them as well as for them to, look outside of what we call the bubble. You know, we live in a wonderful neighborhood. We live in a wonderful, area of San Antonio. It's in many ways a very idealistic sort of existence, but it can also be dangerous because it's idealistic.
Yeah.
So you don't really see how other people really live. So we encouraged our boys to join us for those kinds of serving opportunities or take advantage of them through our youth group. Um, One of our boys went on one or two mission trips because those things can have a really enormous impact on how a kid sees their world and what's the truth about how other people live. Um, so yeah, we were pretty diligent about impressing upon our kids, our boys, what what kind of human beings we wanted them to be. And sometimes I remember a conversation I had with one of my boys. Something had happened, and I was having to, basically confront something, and I just said, two reasons why that's not acceptable behavior. One is because you're a Wilson, and Wilsons don't treat people that way. That's not how we're going to, you know, handle a situation like that. And the second is that you're a Christian. You're a follower of Jesus Christ. You've made a profession of faith in Christ, and Christ doesn't want you to behave that way. And it wasn't a scolding sort of thing. It's like, no, here's the reasons why we want you to make a different choice. Um, we had this thing that we always said to our boys whenever they were going to someone else's house for like a sleepover or we were sending them off to camp. Uh, we'd always say, make good choices, make good choices. And um, it, it ended up being that they knew what that meant in our minds, that we didn't have to net that out for them. Uh, but we wanted to impress upon them that the choices you make have enormous impact on a lot of what your life becomes.
Yeah.
So it was just a pretty normal thing for us to say to our boys, make good choices, make good choices. Um, so in Charlotte and I's mind is this is a stewardship. These two boys are a stewardship, and I have to answer to God about what I did with them. And you know, Charlotte and I have a lot of reasons, have enormous numbers of reasons to celebrate. Our boys turned out well adjusted, makes a lot made of. They have both made a lot of good choices. Um, they're being incredibly productive as human beings, been enormously responsible with the paths they've chosen. And um, while we certainly give God the glory for that, we understand that some of that is a reflection of that we were very intentional and involved in their development as human beings. We spoke to those things, we modeled those things, we held them accountable to those kinds of things so that there was a greater likelihood that they would continue in those things the older they got.
Yeah.
So, um, I'm trying to think. Honesty was a big thing in our home. We always encouraged our boys, just tell us the truth. If you've done something, don't lie to us. That just makes it worse, right? Of trying to figure it out. Um, we had, my boys are very different, different personalities, different styles. Our youngest one, he was the kid that couldn't sit still. He was always moving, always into things, always, ready to go. Our oldest one was a bit more sedentary, a lot more happy and content, maybe just chilling. Um, they had very different approaches to homework. Um, my oldest son is brilliant. Again, maybe that's just I'm a biased dad, but it's a really sharp mind. So homework for him was a piece of cake, and he could be doing many things and still get his homework done. Um, our youngest one, he's every bit as intelligent. It just school was different for him. He had to work harder at it, but that's what he was really good at. He was incredibly disciplined. So he was the kid that he'd come through the door after school and he'd have a short, time to take a break, eat a snack or something like that. And then without us telling him, he would go and sit down at a desk and he'd start plowing through his homework and wouldn't really give himself the permission to go and do something else until his homework was done.
Yeah.
And and we encouraged that. We affirmed that because we thought that's a really important discipline for life, and it's demonstrated uh, certainly in his regard about how it helped him when he went off to the university. And so um, yeah, we were just and again, I'm going to give my wife far more credit than myself. Just incredibly engaged and aware and involved in what's going on with your kid. Um, Very intentional pursuit of trying to shape in them the kind of character, sense of responsibility that they need to be when they become adults.
Yeah.
So that's how I view this idea of stewardship. Charlotte and I will answer to God about what we did to shape the life of our kids.
How does that play in? So whenever I think of like a steward or like say like you're the steward of a garden, well occasionally weeds come up
Yeah,
and you need to pull the weeds out and
yeah,
get them out. So like how does that play in? So obviously like there's correcting bad behavior. But what kind of advice would you give for like bad friends or bad influences or even bad ideas that your kids may be taking hold of?
yeah. That's a great question, and some of that, how you manage and direct that, I think, is a matter of what age they are.
Yeah.
Um, so when they're younger, I think a parent just has to be a bit more directive and saying, you know, I don't, you're not going to do that. That's not how we're going to do that. Or, yeah, that's not a friend that we would choose for you. Doesn't mean we can't have a play date. Again, we're talking little kids. Doesn't mean we can't have a play date, but probably not going to become a regular occurrence. Or it might be best if that person joined a larger group of kids so that they don't become an undue influence. So yeah, I think there's a certain stage in a kid's life where the parents just have to learn how to say no. We're not going to do that. That's not good for you, and I'm going to make that decision for you. Not 8 year old you is going to make that decision for us. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think as they get older, um, some of that is learning, beginning the process of releasing them. They're getting older, and so the best parenting strategy is learning how to let them make mistakes.
Yeah.
And the beauty of a really healthy home is that they can make the mistakes in a loving environment where, yeah, there might be some consequences and there might be some backwash to the decision they made, but they're still surrounded by a loving mom and dad who are going to help them navigate, finding their way through whatever those consequences might be. And I guess whatever age they are, if you see them hurtling down the highway toward a really catastrophic sort of decision, I think again, as a parent, you need to accept your responsibility as an adult in their life to say, I strongly caution you from what it is that you're about to do. Maybe they haven't thought it through. Just be a sounding board, help them understand some of the other implications to what it is they're about to do. That's not you controlling their life. That's you being um, a mentor of sorts to say, yeah, you may be 18, but you're not 48. And so you might not have enough experience under your belt. You might not have enough miles under your belt to really have thought through all the implications of what it is you're about to do. Well, I happen to be 48. I've made some mistakes along the way. I got a few more miles on these tires. So here's some perspective I could offer you, not as a know it all, but just someone who's further down the road. So I think a parent should always have that prerogative or should accept that responsibility. Like I said, my boys are 30 and 25 now. If I saw either of my sons about to make a really, really lousy choice, it wouldn't be me saying, "Well, I'm not their parent anymore because they're 30." I'd say, "No, it's still my kid."
You wouldn't say, "Well, whatever makes you happy?" Oh.
No,
I
I
thought that
wouldn't.
was good advice.
Yes, too many parents think that. But we didn't even teach them that strategy when they were 8 or 9.
Yeah.
It wasn't always about what made you happy; it was what was healthiest.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I again, because of my role as a pastor, I just see too many sad stories of parents who don't get engaged and aren't involved and certainly aren't intentional. They're kind of, crossing their fingers and hoping for the best. And they allow their kid all sorts of things that are full of dangers, and then they wonder why their kid ends up on the wrong side of the law or wrong side of physical health or the wrong side of emotional health because they weren't being good stewards of
Yeah.
of their kids.
Something I always enjoyed, kind of going back to like whenever you have to tell them no or no, you can't do this. Something I always enjoyed that my parents did was that they would let me argue, like in a respectful way,
Yeah,
but I was allowed to ask why and make my case essentially.
sure.
But then they also had to make their case. And now occasionally we would still end on
Yeah, at
we
an
disagree
impasse.
and it's
Sure.
still just no.
Right.
But I could at least ask them why because like especially once you get to a certain age, like kids aren't stupid. You could probably, they might not like it, but you could probably at least get them to realize, okay, well, here's a good reason why you're saying no. I don't like it, but whatever.
Yeah.
But at least that's how I was. So I always enjoyed, like, yes, still be respectful, but don't just say no. Like something my wife always said was like, it was always just no, and there was no more conversation about that.
Right.
And she did not like that at all.
Yeah, and the reason why that's not a healthy thing and what your parents did in allowing you to have the debate or the discussion or even the argument, um, why that's healthier, far healthier, is because again, you're teaching your children how to think through things.
Mhm.
If all you do is tell them no without any reasons or without any explanation, you're not equipping them with the mental faculties to think through the choices they're about to make. But when you have that dialogue, have that discussion, you're kind of exercising those intellectual muscles in the life of your child to be able to think through things rather than just simply see it from the perspective that they see it.
Well, and so I've seen so many people that their parents were super hard line, it was just, "No, my way or the highway." Well, then the kids were, like, that much more rebellious because
Uh,
like, anything they could get away with, or as soon as they went off to college,
sure.
watch out.
And
Like, it was a bad
it
problem.
happens a lot
Yeah,
because basically when you're just always telling your kid no, or you're not inviting them into the discussion about why, then what you're doing is you're just creating resentment.
yeah,
So, in my head, because we had a little bit of that in the house I grew up in. It was a pretty, um, it had a lot of rules, and those rules were meant to be obeyed, and they weren't always explained. And some of that was just sort of the Baptist context that I grew up in, and my parents were sort of navigating as new Christians. But I can remember going to bed sometime thinking, man, when I have kids, I'll never do that. Because so what that represented was frustration and confusion and resentment that I don't know why I can't. I just know I can't. Could someone explain to me why this is, such a um, lousy choice for me to pursue? Um, so yeah, those kids, they live 8, 10, 15 years in that kind of resentment, that kind of confusion and frustration. So they go off to college and now mom and dad aren't there to make their decisions for them. So one, they're not equipped to make good decisions, and two, they just feel like, man, I got free reign and I can do whatever I want. And they go and do whatever they want, and then they realize, oh, there's some backwash to some of those things that I've done.
yeah, yeah, big time.
It ends up creating scars that sometimes last a lifetime.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've often in my messages when I talk about parenting, one of the things that I've said fairly consistently is that um, based on how a parent models life for their kids, and based on a parent kind of doing all their thinking for their kids, or based on a parent who like is overprotective of their kids, what they end up doing is crippling their kids.
yeah,
They're not preparing them to be able to think or make good choices about life ahead of them. So when life comes at them, they're just not prepared. And so what you've done is essentially crippled your child to really find their way through life.
yeah,
And some kids never quite recover from that crippling. They end up making lousy choices their entire life. Some of them sort of, find their footing and go, "Oh, I see how I got here. I can't let that happen anymore." And they end up putting putting a life together. But again, as a pastor, I just see so many really sad stories of kids making lousy choices, and I don't want to put it all on the parents because at a certain age, a kid has to kind of accept responsibility. But some of the groundwork for those lousy choices were created by parents who never taught their child to think or never gave them any choices to sort of mess up and figure out, or they were just so overprotective of their kids that they're not prepared for the realities of life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
What else I have? You know, Jesus talks about, let the little kids come to me. And he actually makes a statement about, the greatest in the kingdom of heaven is like a child. And so I've always thought that was an important principle for parenting is recognizing that even though my kid may be younger than me, I can still learn from. I think there's an innocence of faith that Jesus is affirming. There's an innocence of a child just trusting things that they don't completely understand. And he's saying to adults, we can learn from these little people this idea of trusting God without necessarily having all the information or having all the questions answered. And so I tried to take a kind of mindset where I can learn from my boys, and I can learn from some of the ways that they look at life, reminding myself that even at whatever age I was older than them, I didn't have it all figured out. And my oldest son again is very, very brilliant. He thinks really well and has since he was a kid. And I can remember times having discussions with Paul J involved where I was like, "Eh, kid's got a good point. I mean, that makes sense. He's incredibly logical and he uses good reason." So there was sometimes I just sort of like, man, the kid's 15. I just learned something from him I never understood before. And that could have to do with some spiritual discussions of life. That could have to do with political discussions of life, or just sort of, how people treat each other. He's incredibly smart about that stuff. David, our youngest, he was incredibly insightful. He could, I don't know how to describe it. David has a knack for seeing through things, and he kind of sees behind the facade and knows what's really going on. And there was a couple of times that David sort of exposed inconsistencies in my own life as a parent, where I thought I was doing the right thing, and then David's looking through it and going, "Yeah, but really, what you're doing, Dad." And I was like, "He's got me. He's right." So, um, if you look at the principle that there's a lot that we can learn from kids about life, um, then I think parents would do well to not take some kind of an arrogant, inflexible, I've got it all figured out approach, and allow their kids to have thoughts and to have feelings and to make observations. Because if a parent's humble and sort of generous of spirit, they're opening themselves up to learning some things that they might not otherwise. Um, Trying to think if there's a way I could illustrate that specifically. Um, can't think of something off the top of my head, but I just know there were many times that I ended up learning from my boys.
Well, I think it's kind of an attitude of humility in that like they'll actually have conversations with you and tell you what they think, because if you're just telling them no, you're wrong all the time, or
Right.
no, it's this way, then you're not actually hearing. It kind of goes back to that helping them learn how to think, and then occasionally you actually turn out to be they end up being right about
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it allows them to actually think and process and tell you something without just them. It because kids can have the impression that their parents think that they're just stupid. Oh, well, you're young. Like,
Yeah.
one of my least favorite thing was I'd be arguing with a family member, and they'll be like, "Well, you're only however many old.
Yeah.
You're only this old,"
You're
and
only
I'm like,
10.
"Tell me how I'm wrong. Don't tell me my age."
That's good. That's good.
I hated it.
Yeah. And I think yeah, I think you nailed it. Um, there is a lot to learn from another perspective, and just because someone's 12 doesn't mean their perspective is wrong. In fact, it might be a perspective you haven't even considered.
Yeah. And it might be wrong, but then it allows you to figure out, like, okay, well, what do they think? Well, then let me keep asking questions and then, help them realize, oh yeah, that is wrong, or it's inconsistent with something else that,
Yeah.
we're Christians or whatever. Like, you at least have a conversation about it and lead them in the right way rather than just saying, no, you're wrong, it's this.
Yeah. This may be related. I see this a lot. Um, Sometimes parents, when they do something wrong or stupid, have a really difficult time learning how to apologize to their kids,
Mm.
or admitting to their kids that they did something wrong. And um, I see this a lot. And what I tell parents is it's okay that you don't have it all figured out or that you don't always get it right. That's actually a good example to set for your kids. It's a certain humility about life. And so when you mess something up or when you get it wrong, rather than trying to, guard your image, go ahead and admit to your kids, "Hey, I didn't handle that properly. I didn't do that right." And then welcome the conversation about how I could have done it differently or why I should have done it differently. But when you maintain the image like, "Oh, I'm not gonna back down on what I did, and I'm not gonna fess up to what I did." Again, you're crippling your kid. You're not teaching them how to live with humility, and you're not teaching them how to live with a certain authenticity to where they're capable of admitting they're wrong and making the necessary apologies.
Yeah. I mean, the kids are gonna figure out that you're not always right at some point anyways, and
So,
then if you're rigid like you're describing, they're gonna lose
yeah.
respect for you.
Yeah, in fact, they'll lose respect for you more by your
Yeah.
refusal to admit you're wrong or your refusal to apologize. But when you come with a very humble spirit and say, "Hey, you know what? Daddy messed that up. I didn't handle that right. I'm really sorry for how I responded to you or my temper or whatever." That's a respect builder.
Yeah.
They appreciate that, and they know how difficult that might have been, and so their respect for you goes up rather than goes down. It's the parent who refuses to ever admit they're wrong or apologize for something that they did was inappropriate, who loses respect. Because, like you said, at some age, the kid gets smart enough to be able to see through it and go, "My dad's a jerk. He just totally screamed at me, lost his temper with me, but he can't come back and fix that."
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know how we're doing on time, but I'm going to give you my number one threat to
2.
good parenting of kids.
Okay.
And it's going to make me sound so old.
Alright.
And it's going to make me sound so much like the preacher.
You're not gonna say the Facebook, are you?
Thanks, Mike. Not the Facebook. I am convinced I have it would take a lot for me to change my perspective. I think nowadays, one of the worst things a parent can do is let their children have unfettered access to a cell phone, to a computer, and to video games. That's where I am.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I think that most adults having unfettered access to the internet is a liability, like, much
Exactly.
less a kid.
Exactly. But I have done too much reading. I have seen too many personal examples. I have um, I have too much data for me not to be incredibly concerned about um, the whole social media, computer, television, all of that media input. And it's primarily accessible through that phone that they can't even put down because they're so tethered to it. I am just seeing more and more illustrations, more and more proof that it's not good.
Yeah,
And again, that's not to say a phone is evil. I'm just saying it can become a source of tremendous influence in the life of a kid. That's not to say that all video games are bad, but it can become um, uh, a very addictive sort of behavior that does not prepare a child to really engage in real life. And it's just too many heartbreaking stories of kids who um, either found stuff on the internet that ended up becoming an enormous problem, or a certain what words would I describe? A certain dependency or codependency on the escape of video games that they become really unprepared for the basic responsibilities of life.
yeah.
And I know that there's a sense of that that sounds like the old guy, but I've just the data I've seen, the stuff I've read is really concerning.
No, it doesn't sound like the old guy at all because my generation was the generation where we were given those, like, we had a childhood without it, and then we were given it.
Oh,
And so, um, like iPod, like the first iPod ever came out, like the touchscreen iPod, which
yeah.
then started with the first iPhone. Like that came out, whenever we were, I don't know, 10 or 12, something like that. And so, maybe older. But anyways, like my generation is pretty much on the same page. Like we saw, because we're the ones that it happened to.
You were the guinea pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like we saw what that result was and how it's affecting everybody now. And so, granted, I mean, you see all these little kids who have all the problems now, but like anybody in my generation who like just gives their small child unfettered access, it's like no excuse. Like, way better.
Yeah.
Like, it's so bad. I mean, like that explicit content you were talking about, the average age is like 10 or 12 now.
Yeah. And the access, even I mean, I talk to parents who feel like, I mean, we put every control on that it was possibly available. We downloaded special software to, keep that from happening, but a lot of times kids are too smart, or the people who create media are too smart, and they're figuring out ways around it.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad stuff that kids find themselves exposed to. And um, I think one of the things that I'm seeing is like really concerning about all of that is it's not even about necessarily the content of a video game or the content of social media. It's a lot of times just about the compulsive nature that's being created in that child as a habit that they can't focus on anything outside of the games or the constant, input of scrolling through social media.
Yeah.
It's literally a compulsive sort of behavior. And, I've been pretty honest about a journey in my own life where I I had to find my way out of what was dangerously close to an addiction. And so I did a lot of research on addictions and how they come about. And the genesis of any addiction typically is some manner of coping. Long before it's addictive and destructive, it's just a person who's feeling something. They're angry, they're sad, they're lonely, they're afraid, and they go looking for something that will take those feelings away. That's the nature of coping. What happens in the life of a kid is that they don't have the maturity to make a wise choice about how they're going to go about coping. They don't always make good choices about what it is they're going to use. So a kid, a teenager, a preteen, they'll end up finding that the thing that makes them feel better is alcohol or marijuana or pornography or gambling or shopping or video games. I feel better when I'm lost in this game. And when that coping goes through a cycle of frequency to where anytime I feel anything I don't want to feel, I'll compulsively resort to this thing. That's what I'm seeing as some of the most dangerous downsides of like video games and social media is these kids are just running to this stuff because they're trying to, numb themselves from all these things that, like, I don't like homework. Oh, okay, I'll run to video games. I don't like my parents asking me to cut the lawn. I run to my video games. And it's just such a lousy and dangerous pattern that I see created in so many kids' lives. Um, a couple years ago, I had something happen that it was noteworthy because of the frequency at which it happened. I had, and I don't want to exaggerate the numbers, but I had a half dozen to a dozen parents make an appointment to come and talk with me. And this was all kind of at like around the same period of time. And they were basically telling me the story, and it was true of each of the stories, was I sent my kid off to college, and their freshman year was a night. And now my kid's home again, left in the middle of the semester, came home before he finished his freshman year. And again, it was just noteworthy because I had so many of them sort of happen all at the same time. And there was a lot of factors to it. But one of the factors that I thought I observed in these stories was these kids went off to college and life got real. Like you had to study, had to go to class, you had to do your wash, you had to find dinner, you had to clean up after yourself. And they were completely unprepared for it. And a lot of times, what these kids were doing is they're getting to college, finding life to be really challenging. And so they were literally running into their video games or running into their social media as a way to cope. And they were literally wasting all of their time to do these things that were necessary for them to stay in school.
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, it's so sad to think that there's a generation of kids that if parents aren't actively engaged in managing, helping a child manage their cell phone or manage their social media or manage their video game play, um, it can really create a, a young person who's really unprepared uh, for their life.
Yeah.
Um, a few years ago, I was much more active on Facebook than I am now, and I kind of at times would use Facebook as a kind of a social commentary. So I remember I had written this post about sort of what I'm talking about, like the dangers of video games. And my own son, my youngest son, he comments on there. He goes, "Okay, boomer." I'm like, "Thanks, Dave, calling me out." But yeah, so it's not the most popular opinion, and the pressure to have a phone or the pressure to, you know, play these games is so great. Um, and I really admire the parents who are, taking the hard line sometimes and just saying, nope, not yet. It's not time. You're not ready to have that responsibility.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, like, I can understand it from, like, a safety perspective because, like, if your kid's going somewhere for the first time without you or whatever, you want them to have a way to
Yeah,
contact you.
exactly.
But, like, in the past, it's like, okay, well, we'll get them a flip phone. But, like, whenever my kids get that age, it's gonna cost me more money to get a freaking flip phone because it's gonna be essentially like an artifact. It's like go buy a big old, like a VCR. VCRs are expensive now. They used to be $20, now they're like 150. But
Yeah,
anyways, because they don't make them anymore. But, yeah, so I can understand the safety perspective, but, yeah, just to give them, like, carte blanche, here's
yeah,
everything in the world,
yeah,
and then expect that not to mess with them,
yeah.
especially, like, the communities, like on TikTok and stuff, like there's all these like weird subcultures that kids will fall into.
Oh,
And then,
yeah.
they come and tell you all kinds of crazy stuff.
And again, the research I've done, the people behind a lot of what's created by as content on these social media platforms, their intent is evil.
Yeah.
They are wanting to create addicted kids, and they're pulling them into all sorts of things that a kid's just curiosity intrigues them, and the next thing you know, they're in a very dark place. And so again, I don't want to sound like, the prophet of doom, but any parents who are listening that kind of at the stage of trying to sort out at what age do we give a kid a cell phone and what age do we put a computer in their room, say, just think carefully about that. I'm not saying it's all evil. I'm just saying the potential is pretty significant.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And I'll just close with this. One of my great concerns, again, my boys are 30 and 25, so there's a lot of this that we're already past in many ways. But as a pastor who just talks to too many broken-hearted parents. Our kids are absolutely inundated with influences these days that are immoral, that are pornographic, that are downright evil. And I think you and I have had the conversation. You could extrapolate that out to just sheer demonic, that Satan is using uh, so many influential structures of our society to introduce young people to all kinds of crazy stuff. And it makes my heart heavy to know what kids have to navigate at school, amongst their friends, amongst the media that they consume. It's really, really destructive. And so I guess that, to wrap this all up, that's why I would say parents, be engaged, be involved, be intentional, really value your child enough to where you're going to give them the time and you're going to give them the energy that they deserve as um, a young human being that you have the responsibility to shape. And don't, again, you want to be friendly with your kids and you want to be their buddy on a certain level, but you can't sacrifice your role as being a parent.
Yeah.
And, if at times you have to play the bad guy and you have to say no and you have to toe the line and your kid's angry at you and your kid's resentful, you know, do that because their lives are very valuable and there's plenty of people and opportunity out there for others to mentor your child in a way that's not healthy for them. So cherish them, be good stewards of them, um, keep an open, humble heart, learn from them, and be very, very engaged in things that they're engaged in.
Yeah. Because you'll have to answer for them, right? Like
Yeah,
if you know the barbarians are at the gate and you let your kid go out anyways.
yeah, yeah, and that's the story of stewardship.
Yeah.
You think of the parable of the stewards. God entrusts these stewards with certain responsibilities, and then I love a certain rich man called his servants together and trusted these stewards to him. And then later in the parable, it says, and the man returned from his journey. And there is a day that God's going to come back and he's going to ask for an accounting of the stewardships that he's entrusted to our care. And I do believe that, God's going to say, what you do with those kids I gave you.
Yeah.
Were, were you a good steward of them or were you a lazy steward? And uh, Charlotte and I hope that we demonstrated we weren't interested in being lazy stewards of the kids that God entrusted to our care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very good.
All righty.
I think those were good.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you. As always, we'll see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this presentation of Cibolo Creek Community Church. If you did, please consider supporting the ministry of our church. Your donations make a difference. To check out more resources or to share a gift, please visit us at cibolocreek.com. Thanks for listening.